This video is going to show you some different options that can be used on your final project in order to take your project to the next level. So we're going to talk about adding a border around your letters, adding a color in the background, adding a texture in the background, adding text, so incorporating a quote into your composition. So that's just going to give you a couple of different directions to take your final project. You don't have to use all of these on your final, but definitely go through and practice each of these now so that you know what you like and what you don't like when you go to put everything together on your final project. The first thing we're going to do is add a border around all of your letters, which in InDesign or Photoshop is called a stroke. So I'm going to highlight and select all of these at the same time so that I'm adding the same stroke to each of them. If you want the stroke or outline to look different on all of these, then definitely go through them individually to add a different stroke, a different color, border, and how you want those to differ individually. The first thing I'm going to do is click on stroke, which is on the right side over here. I'm going to click on the letters and a couple of options show up. The first option I'm going to adjust is the weight. So I'm going to click this arrow at the top until I get to the spot that I'm happy with for the weight of my outline. So right now I want to make sure that my outline's visible, but I don't want to get carried away and take away from my letters. So I still want my letters to be the main focus. So I'm not going to make my weight or thickness too big, but just enough where you can visibly see it. But every composition is going to be different. So for yours, you might want a heavier weight. The next thing that I'm going to adjust is the type. Right now it's set to just a normal outline, so it's a solid outline or solid stroke, but there's a lot of different options you can try out as well. So click through these and see if there's a different option that fits with your letters and your overall idea for your composition. I'm going to leave it to just a solid outline for now, and then I'm going to adjust the color. To adjust the color of your stroke, you're going to go to the left of where it says stroke and click on that outline. And then it shows up, there's a couple colors down here that you can quickly choose from. But if you would like to select and set your own color, you can click through to get these different swatches and decide what color looks the best. So you can click through. Some colors might be too much and take away from your composition. So definitely pick a color that fits well with your image. I'm going to keep it set to black so that I have more of a neutral color that's going to not take away from my specific image here. I have a lot of colors and a lot going on, so I want to keep it simple. However, if you maybe have every color of your image set to black and white, or if they're all pretty consistent and not feeling like it's too much going on, you could definitely set your stroke to a different color. So click through and see what works the best for your specific image. The next thing that we're going to do is add a color behind our letters. So to do this, I'm going to start out by opening up my layers panel. So I'm clicking on window, going down to layers. Right now I have layer 1 set, and layer 1 is where all of my letters are at. I'm going to add a new layer and drag this below layer 1. I can even double click to add a name to this, and I'm going to set this as background. So that way I don't get confused with what layer I'm working on, and I'm able to remember which layer I want selected to add my background color on. So now I have my background on the bottom, so underneath my letters, and I'm going to click on this rectangle tool and drag across where I want my background color to go. The rectangle tool is different from the frame tool. So again, the frame is what you place text or place pictures into. This rectangle tool you can fill with color. So I'm going to come over to the right where it says fill and select a color to fill this with. Like I said before, pick something that's not going to take away from your letters. So I'm going to come back over here and just choose black, go through and select more of a light gray color to work with so that it's more neutral. But a brighter color could definitely still work for your image. So pick and choose what works the best for your composition. The next thing that we're going to practice incorporating is a texture. I downloaded a texture picture from Google by just typing in texture, finding an image I liked, and saving it. For practice, go ahead and find one online. For your final project, you will need to take your own texture picture. So to do that, basically just take an up-close picture of different objects that would create an interesting background texture for your project. Before we place the texture picture, I'm going to use this rectangle frame tool and place where I want my texture to go. So I would like my texture to fill the entire background, so I clicked and dragged across. One thing I forgot to do before I added this frame is make sure it's behind everything in my layers panel. So I'm going to actually go back to Window and then Layers and add another layer, move this below my background. I can name this texture, hit OK, and now I'm good to go with my frame. So now I know for sure this is going to be in the background. File Place will allow me to place my texture. And I'm going to select that. And it's taking a minute to load, but it placed into my document. It's hard to see because it is hidden behind everything else that I have. So right now I'm going to click and go to Fitting, Fill Frame Proportionately. So now my texture is stretched and fills the entire background. Now another thing that we're going to play around with is a drop shadow. So I'm going to go back to my layers panel and decide what I want to add my drop shadow to. So right now I'm going to add it to my background. So I'm going to lock my texture and lock my top layer with my letters just so they don't get in the way. And now all that I can select and move is the background. So once I have my background selected, I'm going to go ahead and right click on it. And once you right click, you can go to Effects, which is going to have a bunch of different things that you can play around with. So definitely play around with some of these to see what you like and what could be an interesting effect to use. But I'm going to click on Drop Shadow for now. And you can adjust a couple of different settings with your drop shadow. If you click this little preview button, it's going to allow you to see it in real time and how that's affecting your image. So I can change the angle if I want my drop shadow to be pointing a different direction. I can make the distance closer or further away. And then you can change the opacity. So if you don't want it to be as obvious, you can lower your opacity and then hit OK when you're done. A couple other effects that you can play around with are transparency. So maybe you want your background color to be see-through. You can adjust that transparency. And then there's also some of these other settings directly on here that you can go in and click and play around with. So experiment, see what you like, what you don't like, and what you might want to use for your final project. So I'm going to hit OK at this point. And the last thing that I want you to practice on your practice compositions is adding text or some sort of quote. So to do that, I'm going to extend my rectangle down so I have some space for my text. And then I'm going to come over to my text tool and click and drag across where I want it to fit. So now I'm going to go in. My text right now is very small. I'm going to change that to make it a larger size. So all of the settings for my text are found along the right side over here. So I'm going to change the size so that it is a little bit bigger. And then you can also change the fill to a different color if you would like to work with a different color. And then you can also add a stroke or border around your text. I'm going to leave mine set to how it is right here. And you can go ahead and either find a quote online for your practice image, make something up, type just the same word over and over again a few times as a placeholder. For your final project, you obviously want to make up your own quote or use text that's going to have some sort of meaning. But just to get the idea for practice, I'm going to type smile a few times here to play around with how I want my text to look. So I'm going to highlight it and adjust and add some sort of stroke to it. So that increases the thickness. You can adjust the color of the stroke so that it stands out. Play around with the spacing, play around with the font and how you want this to look. And then when you're finished, save it first of all as an InDesign file so you can come back and edit. And then also save it as a JPEG to turn in and submit as your finished practice image. So to do that, you're going to go to File, Save As, and then you can adjust the file name, where you want it saved, and then hit Save. That will save it as your InDesign file. I'm going to go up to File and then Export, and this will allow me to save it as a JPEG. So this is different from Photoshop, where you do have